Hi class, welcome back to this series of videos. Now just a few moments ago as I was going through my list and going through some of the previous recordings, I realized that when I mentioned chapter number inside, it's not always matching up with the chapter number in the textbook, and I do apologize for that. I have gone back, I believe, and fixed that in my chapter titles or in my video titles. So if you need to go back and check that out, go with what the title says and not what I say inside the beginning of the video as far as chapter number is concerned. So I do apologize for that. With that being said, let's get into our discussion of the 1970s. So this is, we're getting near the end of it. This should be chapter 28 of the American Yawp. And this is, again, economic challenges are going to be happening. Political landscapes are shifting. Significant social changes are occurring. Basically, this is a continuation of what we saw begin in the 1960s. Now, we're talking from Watergate. We got that major crisis that hits. We got an energy crisis in the 1970s. A bunch of things are going on. So this is going to leave an indelible mark on American history. So let's get started with this conversation. Now, the 1970s are going to see a dramatic economic downturn. Partly, I think, probably because of World War II. We saw this great economic boom, and then we had Korea, and we've got now Vietnam going on. It's just war is beginning to draw upon the United States, and people are getting tired of it, and it's a difficult thing to deal with in such a long term. Now, one of the most memorable moments of the decade is going to be the energy crisis that hits. In 1973, OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, this is a group of countries around the world that produce oil. The United States is not a part of it, is going to impose an oil embargo in response to the United States supporting Israel, who had gone to war with some of its neighbors in the Yom Kippur War. I believe that was 73. It was right about that. I don't remember the exact year. Now, this led to long lines in gas stations, skyrocketing fuel prices as well, and Americans had to rethink their reliance on cheap energy. And the crisis is going to highlight the fragility of the global economy because we have become a global economic power now. Well, things are slowing down. We're relying on other people, and it's catching up with us. Now, on the political front, this decade is going to be rocked by the Watergate scandal. Richard Nixon had been a fairly popular president from 69 until he was reelected in 72 to become to his second term in 73. Well, the problem is Richard Nixon was a bit paranoid. I would say a bit paranoid is understating the fact. There was recording devices inside the White House. He was afraid that he was going to lose the election in 72. And so from what it appears and what journalists began to uncover is a break-in in the Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate Hotel. Nixon had knowledge of the break-in. He had knowledge of the operation to steal information on his political opponent. Well, by 1974, information is coming out. Nixon is facing impeachment. Nixon becomes the first U.S. president to resign, and he does that in 1974. Gerald Ford, his vice president, who actually had not been his first pick as vice president. Spiro Agnew had been his first one. Spiro Agnew had been forced to resign, and I think even tried for some corruption. So Gerald Ford had come right out of the U.S. Senate to be the vice president. Want some trivia? He becomes the only vice president, the only president that I know of that was never elected to a executive branch office. So that's kind of weird, and it's actually going to, I think, probably hurt Ford in the long run. Add to the fact that he pardons Nixon in 76 when Gerald Ford runs for his own term in office. The American people are going to reject him in favor of Jimmy Carter. And the 1970s are also going to bring a conclusion to the Vietnam War. Under the Nixon administration, this policy of Vietnamization is going to seek to shift the burden of fighting from us to the South Vietnamese forces, while the U.S. forces withdraw. So the idea is this isn't our fight anymore. You keep going on. We've trained you. You do your thing. It's not going to work out well. And by 1975, North Vietnam is going to capture Saigon. We've said that we'll come in and help you if something like this happens, but we're in the middle of the Watergate scandal and the Nixon investigation. And of course Ford is trying to get his feet under him. We help to evacuate, but that's about it when Saigon falls in 75. Now the 1970s are also going to see the continuation of social movements. Second wave feminism is going to gain momentum. pushing greater equality, or the idea of greater equality in the workplace and reproductive rights for women. 1973, we're going to see the passage of Roe versus Wade. And of course, here in 2024, that was all in the news over the past year because that was overturned by a court case last year or so. Meanwhile, gay rights and LGBTQ rights activists, they're going to be galvanized by events that had happened in the previous decade, like the Stonewall riots, I believe 69. That movement continues into the 1970s as well, and so does the counterculture movement that we had talked about previously. Now, culturally, in the 1970s, we're going to see significant shifts. We're going to see the rise of disco, and artists like Donna Summer and the Bee Gees are going to define the music scene. By the end of the 1970s, we're going to start to see movies like Star Wars and Jaws. Those are going to revolutionize Hollywood, and we're going to just start to see a shift in the kinds of movies that Hollywood is making. And technology is going to begin to transform life as well. We're going to see the emergence of personal computers and video games like early Atari consoles and all those sorts of things. Now, in foreign policy, the decade's going to end with significant challenges and achievements. Jimmy Carter's elected in 1976, and he sort of bills himself as a moral sort of country guy. And in 1976, people really go for that. He had brokered the Camp David Accords. That's going to sort of end some of the conflict between Egypt and Israel that had sort of defined the past 10 years or so. And then also we're going to see the handing of the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. So these are some things that's going to happen during the Carter administration. But Carter's presidency is going to be marred by the Iranian Revolution in 1979. The Shah of Iran comes to the United States. At the same time, a revolution breaks out in that country. They want the Shah. They want to put him on trial. He's come here for cancer treatment, and Carter doesn't hand him over. When that happens, a number of Americans in the American embassy in Tehran are going to be taken prisoner, and they will be held for 444 days, the entire last half of Jimmy Carter's, basically the last year and a half or so of Jimmy Carter's presidency. So when he's running for president again in 1980, he's actually not doing a lot of running. He's trying to end this crisis. I think it says a lot that those men and women are going to be released on the day that Ronald Reagan takes the oath of office in January of 1981. And that ends the Iranian hostage crisis. And Jimmy Carter is going to go back home to Plains, Georgia. So the 1970s are going to be a time of crisis, a time of change. The economic struggles and political scandals, the cultural shifts, the global challenges. This is a big decade. And again, like all of these videos, please do not take this as the only information that you need. There's resources out there. Your book should always be read. But this is to give you a brief overview to go back, maybe listen to quickly prior to your test, to remind you of some of the big points that that's been covered, that you should have read, that your professor probably has gone through much more in depth, and I hope that this is helpful. So do well on your exams, and let me know if this has been helpful to you. Take care.